Thanks for joining us for this edition of Current Reflections with longtime tribal college leader Janine Pease. As the founding president of Little Bighorn College, LBHC, Janine Pease blazed trails for all women leaders in the tribal college movement. At LBHC, Dr. Pease wove Crow culture and values throughout the college's curriculum, with native language revitalization playing an especially prominent role. Just as significant as her leadership is Pease's research in Indigenous language revitalization. She has authored several articles and studies on the subject, including the American Indian College Fund's 2004 report, Native American Language Immersion, a detailed examination of the state of language immersion programming at tribal colleges and beyond. In her research, Dr. Pease investigated language curricula at Maori and Native Hawaiian immersion schools and showed how such programming could be applied successfully at tribal colleges. She served as the principal investigator at the Crow Nation's Chickadee Lodge Immersion School and now is the board chair for the Crow Language Consortium and coordinator for the Crow Language Dictionary Project. Through her groundbreaking research, Dr. Pease has helped change the course of Indigenous language learning in North America. So it is our honor today to have Janine Pease here for this installment of Current Reflections on research at tribal colleges and universities. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Pease.
Well, thank you for having me join this conversation on research at tribal colleges.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about the work you're doing as the coordinator of the Crow Language Dictionary Project?
The Dictionary Project is one of the most exciting activities I've been involved in my entire career. You know, a dictionary is part of what goes on in the study of language. And for tribal nations, a dictionary is a tool that helps stabilize the language. For every classroom, for every teacher and the students in the classroom, people in their homes, a dictionary is just an essential tool. Well, they're not on the shelves. If you're going to have a dictionary, especially the Absaluka language, there are small dictionaries that have been written by Jesuit priests, by some school projects. But you know, a healthy language has some 30,000 words in its entire worldview. And so to have a dictionary, we were anxious to know if we could pull together, you know, a substantial dictionary. Okay, so we made a call and we used a method called the rapid word collection. We called speakers and elders just in a general Facebook invitation, and we had 80 speakers and elders come to 2 locations, and in 2 weeks' time, using a word association methodology, we collected altogether, all of us collected 15,000 words. And this would be added to a 6,000 word dictionary as that had been worked on by a linguist, and the school project dictionary of 3,000 words. So while there's certainly some duplication, we managed to really make a tremendous gain in what on the number of words that could be in our dictionary. And our speakers brought with them their knowledge in specialized areas, in common general areas, and we were able to discover, and of course this is the treat, this is the absolute spice of research, is that we were able to understand the extent to which our elders and speakers had a command of the Absaluka language. They recorded the words, they wrote them down, and they were put into a database. And that database then has become our online dictionary, which is now available at crowlanguage.org online for free. And we're on the verge of issuing a print dictionary. it's an amazing tool, and it's one that is technology friendly. Our young people who are so adept at utilizing their handheld devices can have at their fingertips this dictionary. So we are very, very gratified that since our word collection in 2018, July, 4 years later, we have the online dictionary, and we're planning in June to introduce our in-print dictionary.
Oh.
Yes, this is research. I mean, we didn't know if people would come. We didn't know how well the elders and speakers would work together. There were ways in which our speakers organized themselves in groups of 4 and 5 and 6 speakers. Women preferred to be with women, men with men. All of this was a rapid word collection process, none of which had ever been done in North America before. We used a technology or a method, this rapid word collection, that had been used by SLI Incorporated and by the Language Conservancy only in South America and Africa before. So it was one of those major experiments. How would it work? It worked wonderfully. It worked very
Wow.
efficiently. Our goal was to collect 10,000 words in 2 weeks. We collected 15,000. And
Wow.
if we had had another week or another session, 2 weeks, we'd have probably gone on to collect many more. And we're hoping at some point to have a second rapid word collection. But it was so amazing and exciting. And it's a project that is ongoing, really. You know, there's now a children's dictionary that we've got a grant to the Crow Language Consortium to do. It'll be a picture dictionary, so a version for children to use in their primary classrooms. So that's a quick overview of the Crow Language Dictionary project that I coordinate.
Wow, that's such incredible work and so important too. You mentioned that you're going to be publishing a print version of the dictionary. Is that going to be published there on the reservation, or where are you going to have that published?
Actually, we're publishing it. It's a Chinese publishing company. We're anxious to have it at an available, at a price that's very accessible for our users. And, you know, we have a user public that's relatively, you know, well, it's the Absaloka speakers and Absaloka serving schools. And so we want very much to have that price of the print dictionary accessible. And so we're having it printed in China.
Yeah.
We have a lot of materials that the Crow Language Consortium has developed and produced and published, and the same publisher that we've used for all of those materials then is doing the dictionary.
Yeah, I know a lot of these, academic presses here stateside, they just charge an exorbitant amount for books and making it really kind of inaccessible for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is one of the things that we've discussed with the Crow Language Consortium, that is being the publisher of our own materials. And at this time, we're outsourcing that publishing.
Great. Well, let's move on here with the interview. Tribal colleges and universities are often thought of as community colleges that focus on teaching and job training. How does faculty research fit into this picture, or should it fit in?
Well, tribal colleges certainly fit the definition of a community college. But on the other hand, all of the colleges are chartered by tribal nations, and the tribal nations have a very comprehensive concept of the tribal college. It's both academic and vocational, it's community service, it's research oriented to the extent that knowledge is knowledge of the nation, its resources, its people, its culture and language is yet to be oftentimes recorded and understood. And so It's a more comprehensive community-based institution than the sort of typical community college we might find out there in the United States. And most of the tribal colleges, in fact, I don't know if there's any exception to this, and I've read most of the mission statements, the preservation, protection, and vitalization of culture, language, history is essential to the mission. It's at the heart. So what that does is, by way of carrying that mission out, involves a great deal of research. And many of the tribal nations have called on the tribal colleges to carry out research, especially in the last 20 years. We've seen that happen.
Yeah. Can research contribute to institutional advancement? And if so, how?
Well, you know, tribal colleges faculty have all come from academic programs at the master's and doctoral level. And so the advancement of the institution goes with the faculty. The faculty really carries the instruction that's offered by the institution. To have the faculty involved continually in their areas of research is so critical. And when they do that, they can become a center of research, pushing back those boundaries of knowledge, including and engaging their students in all their disciplines. So it advances the institution to be involved in the community, to recognize the importance of the research that the faculty members do. And faculty members who are involved in research are more likely to be staying at the tribal college. You know, we're very interested to have highest quality instruction, and faculty who are consistently involved in their discipline and their instruction, staying at the tribal college advances the institution.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have a revolving door of faculty. That really is, it means that if there's a constant revolving door, then the quality of instruction is diminished. So having consistent faculty who are involved in their research, in their areas of research, is really essential to the institution, and it advances the institution in that regard. Probably much more respected in among institutions out there as Indigenous institutions when there is ongoing research that is faculty-led.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, I really like what you said there about, faculty retainment. And, as one who taught at a tribal college and who was engaged in research, that I can see how important that is. That really, really does hit home. So can you tell us, how does research affect the advancement of Native nations?
Well, Native nations have need of research in many areas. Their need for research is really hugely comprehensive. And also in reflection of the fact that tribal colleges are land grant institutions, there are areas of the activities of land grant institutions that are immediately connected to the need for research that tribes have, whether it's land or water or economic development, youth development, health, and nutrition, all of those areas that are so much a part of the land grant institution role and mission. It really is a mirror image of the tribal nations' need for research, and the tribal colleges are the engine to get that research done. So Native nations need this type of research. Now, the reason, certainly there's been research done in Indian country, but oftentimes it's powered by research institutions that are at some distance of tribal nations. And while they may be specifically involved in certain research, then that research goes elsewhere. And the scholars that are at the heart of that research and gain from pushing back those boundaries of knowledge, whether it's in health or whether it's in economic development or, water quality studies, that information goes elsewhere and it doesn't end up benefiting the tribal nations. So the tribal colleges really are important at building the advancing opportunities of tribal nations through research.
Do you think TCU should cut back on their teaching loads to offer more room for faculty research?
I know that tribal colleges have the dilemma of how their resources are applied to faculty time. And the faculty load is overly burdened by the need to instruct. Many of the tribal colleges have faculty teaching loads of 15, 16, maybe 18 credits per semester. So how does research fit into that? Well, many tribal colleges look at their summer session as a time, or any of the breaks during the academic year as a time for research. But it is, I think, a dilemma for tribal colleges to understand how this balance works. I think as a tribal college leader, I viewed it that it would contribute to the retention of excellent faculty, to the engagement in research activities, and engage students stay and finish their degrees. I mean, there's a lot of research on student engagement and how much that impacts, the development of scholarship in students. So it is a balancing act. And I do think that the tribal colleges have taken every advantage of their partnership with senior institutions to buy that quarter time or that half time of a faculty member. But indeed, it is a dilemma. You have to have a rather long-term view of how research impacts the retention of faculty, the engagement of students, and really the overall standing as a research institution with the nation, with the tribal nation, and its overall impact in advancing the quality of life in the tribal nation. So it takes some long-term view. But I know that, for example, many tribal colleges have National Institute of Health grants, National Science Foundation grants that will support that quarter time or that half time of that research faculty, that research scholar. And of course, you can't get those grants just by wanting them. You have to be competitive. You have to propose these research activities. But our tribal colleges have been very, very competitive in acquiring these kinds of grants to support the research that their faculty want to be involved in. And it's not just in the sciences. The National Endowment for the Humanities has supported, for example, historical research. I've been involved in an oral history project funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities that has supported Crow Studies faculty and sociology faculty and history faculty in gathering oral history from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So, there are many ways that can be supported. Of course, the dilemma, as I mentioned, is that the tribal colleges funds may not be able to support research always, but there are other ways, other sources of funding that certainly put a premium on research, and it is occurring. It is happening.
Yeah. When you were president of Little Bighorn College, did faculty conduct research? And if so, what kinds of studies did they pursue there?
I was president for 18 years, from 1982 to 2000. during that time, our college became we emphasized the sciences and technology. Now, for a while, in our earliest years, we called ourselves Crow Tech, kind of a nickname. But we wanted very much to, expand the number of scientists, mathematicians, technologists that were in our tribal membership. And we especially became interested in research related activities. And one of the first fundings that we were able to acquire was in a partnership with Montana State University Bozeman. There had been a fish kill on the Bighorn River. Now, the Bighorn River is a blue ribbon trout fishing site, and it's one of the most well-known in especially in Montana, certainly in the northern plains. And the fish kill was a considerable mystery. And we had a number of scientists. I think we had 3 full-time science instructors. They became, as a team, very interested in the fish kill and associated with fish scientists who study fish and the quality of streams and water and the whole environment, the ecosystem surrounding that over at Bozeman. And so over the course of 3 summers, our scientists, along with a team of students, managed to study the Bighorn River, the ways in which application of pesticide and herbicide happens in the season, which is, it's a very vital farming community in the Bighorn River Valley. And so over the course of those 3 years, it became apparent that there was an application of an herbicide in the huge irrigation ditches that go side by side with the Bighorn River. And the BIA irrigation office, the irrigation officer was responsible for applying this herbicide. And so through interviews of all the people that used herbicides and pesticides in this particular period, this season when the fish kill happened, it turned out that the application of this herbicide was like 5 times the legal limit or the recommended limit by the producer of this herbicide. Well, that's not the end of the story. It also turns out that there are varmints that made flues from the irrigation ditch, which was about 100 yards from the river up on the hillside. They made flues. They actually dug flues from the irrigation ditch down to the river, allowing this herbicide then to seep into the live water of the Bighorn River. And so it was quite an amazing, and our scientists got published, and there had only been studies on this particular herbicide in Australia. And our scientists made acquaintance with these scientists and found out that, there were similar kinds of, under similar kinds of conditions. Well, it was a totally exciting thing. And as president, I did a lot of the grant writing at the time. I had to study up considerably on all of the ecosystem. I mean, of course, I had some proposal writing experience by that time, but I really jumped in, you might say head first, but I worked in partnership with the scientists at Bozeman and with our science instructors, and we were able to acquire the funding to do this research. And it was, the students who were engaged in this research were just very interested to understand what had happened to the Bighorn River. It's one of the biggest resources on our reservation. It's a huge river. And of course, all the fishing industry brings in something like $6 million a year to our small community, not particularly necessarily to the Indian community, but the overall Bighorn County Crow Reservation area.
Mhm.
But let me go to a second area of research. We were very interested to understand the water quality, and also in partnership with Montana State University and the leadership of the president there, William Teets. We got a grant to do water quality studies throughout the year on all the live waters. So it's the Little Bighorn, the Bighorn River, and the Pryor Creek. And so our students were taking water samples at designated points of measuring the water quality. And they started this in about 1984. Study is going on even today. So there's a team of students who go out and get those water samples, and then they do the analysis right in our labs.
Mm.
So we discovered that there were seasons and there were places and locations where the water quality was very, very actually loaded with pesticide and loaded with coliforms. And so we were able to instruct our Crow public, who utilizes all of these live streams for ceremonial uses, just swimming, recreational uses, of the seasonal dangers. So those were two of the projects, and they were both very exciting because we had immediate application of what had been found. Now, of course, research doesn't always have immediate application, but this did.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a third one that I'd like to tell you about, is that there is a research scholar who wanted to study the star knowledge of the Apsaloka people. And he engaged one of his more advanced classes in the Crow culture. And they did oral history interviews on star knowledge with over 15 elders in various of the 6 districts. And after they brought all this knowledge in, they actually published this into The Stars We Know, which is in its second printing. The lead author is Dr. Timothy McCleary, and with his assistants, and of course, all the elders are certainly acknowledged there. So that was also very exciting research that our students and our scholars were able to participate in.
Well, that's great. Those are some pretty impressive research projects. And, I'm thinking I might have to talk with President Yarlott about changing the name to Crow Tech.
Yeah. Well,
So, well, let's step back now and look at research from the outside in. In your view, what have been some of the major issues with outsiders from mainstream institutions coming into tribal communities to do research?
yes, there are many research scholars who are involved with research in comprehensive areas on reservations where tribal colleges are serving. And there are challenges that research presents to these researchers from off reservation. They often have very limited contacts on the ground with members of the tribal community. There could be language barriers. And in our case, at the Apsaloka people, the primary language of those over 35, those tribal members over 35, is the use of everyday use of the Apsaloka language. So, but there are protocols in doing research that are absolutely required in our culture. The ways in which we are taught to approach elders, to ask them questions that might pertain to an area of research. And this also implies certainly the IRBs, the research boards that tribal colleges have set up, and many nations also have IRBs. So those outside researchers would have to go through the tribal nations IRB, which then does address those cultural protocols. And, you know, it also has to do with the protection of tribal members of all ages in the conduct of research. So there are certainly challenges. I do think that the tribal colleges have been in existence for over 40 years in many places. A couple of the tribal colleges are beyond 50 years old. Their existence is rather well known in academia, and so that outside scholars and research scientists would have probably the understanding that there may be the potential of someone to associate with or build a partnership with. But I do think that the overall knowledge of culture, history, the localized knowledge of the resources often isn't a factor or characteristic of the outside research scientists. All of that also has, of course, the opposite is true of the scholars at the tribal colleges who have that knowledge, can have it, and certainly practice their discipline within, you know, the confines of the reservation, and have the opportunity to understand the proper protocols. And I think the tribal colleges have gone about forming IRB processes and reviews to, you know, make those sorts of protections, put them in place.
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to conclude with one last question. As both a researcher and longtime tribal college leader, what advice can you give to emerging TCU presidents that may help them to better support and facilitate research?
Well, I believe that there are leading reasons why research needs to be a part of the tribal college agenda. It relates back to the heart of the mission statement, the preservation and protection of the tribal culture, language, lifeways, and of course that implies the land and the relationship of the tribal nation to the land and the water and all of the resources. So it's very comprehensive. And I guess the very next factor would be the manner in which it supports a consistent and over term the retention of excellent faculty, and then the engagement of students in those studies. There is so much tribal knowledge that is yet unrecorded, perhaps yet unstudied. And when we think of the vast knowledge, even in language, the idea that there should be 30,000 words of a healthy language, and yet many dictionaries, many language studies only have recorded 3,000 to maybe 6,000 words. There's so much to be done. There's a whole, you might say, frontier of knowledge that is in front of us, that new knowledge. And I also like to challenge tribal college presidents to understand that among our students are those who have fresh eyes to look at the new knowledge that could be out there, new perspectives. Our students don't have the kind of limitations that boarding schools and, you know, the sort of restrictive environments of education that came from anywhere from 1890 up to the 1970s. These students are from a new time, and they have the amazing potential to push those boundaries back, to see and record that knowledge that needs to be there from our tribes. So I would advise that money invested in research that our faculty could undertake, that our students could be engaged in, is well spent based on what future we hope for our tribal nations.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your insights and your wisdom on this increasingly important aspect of tribal colleges and universities. And so good luck with you too on the Crow Dictionary project, and we hope to see you soon at an AHEC event.
Thank you. I hope to see you there too.
Okay, take care.